Humanity's first contact with the Galactic Empire. The endless dominion, an empire spanning thousands of star systems, had never encountered true resistance. Their imperial fleet, a force of unrivaled size and firepower, moved through the galaxy like an unstoppable storm, bringing entire civilizations to their knees. To the Dominion, conquest was inevitable. But this time, something was different. The fleet had arrived at the Sol system, expecting yet another easy victory. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before: humans. The grand arrival of the Imperial fleet. Admiral Val Kareth, Supreme Commander of the 7th Imperial Conquest Armada, stood on the command bridge of the Judgment of Stars, his flagship. A city-sized battleship lined with gold trim and polished black hull plating. He gazed at the planet before him, a blue and green world orbiting a modest yellow star. "This is the human homeworld?" he asked, voice laced with disdain. Captain Ishvan Rel, his second in command, nodded. "Primitive by all accounts, Admiral. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their fleets are unremarkable. Their weapons, laughable." Kareth let out a low chuckle, his predatory eyes gleaming. "Then this will be quick." The Judgment of Stars led the fleet into Earth's orbit, flanked by hundreds of Dominion warships. From dagger-like Imperial destroyers to planet-cracking Doombringer-class dreadnoughts, the full might of the Dominion hovered over humanity's cradle like a storm cloud ready to strike. Across Earth, billions looked up at the sky as the alien fleet eclipsed the sun, their ships casting massive shadows over entire continents. The Dominion had arrived. The demand for surrender. With a flick of his wrist, Admiral Kareth activated the system-wide communication array. "People of Earth, you stand before the might of the endless Dominion." His voice echoed through every screen, radio, and device on the planet. "Your civilization is now under Imperial rule. Surrender immediately, and you will be integrated peacefully. Resist, and you will be eradicated." There was a long pause. The response, when it came, was not what the Admiral expected. A human voice crackled onto the channel, calm and composed. "Hey, nice ships. You guys trying to compensate for something with all that gold trim?" Admiral Kareth blinked. Laughter erupted from another human voice. "Oh wow, Tony, check this out. They've got the whole evil empire aesthetic going on. Black and gold." "Really? Somebody's watched too many bad sci-fi movies." A murmur spread through the Imperial bridge crew. The officers looked at one another in confusion. "Sir," Captain Roll whispered, "are they mocking us?" Admiral Kareth's jaw tightened, open a direct channel to their commanding officer. The screen flickered, and the image of a human appeared. Admiral Jonathan Hayes of the United Human Defense Fleet leaned back in his chair, sipping from a steaming mug. His uniform was simple, black and blue with minimal insignia, a stark contrast to the extravagant attire of the Dominion officers. He had the relaxed expression of a man who had just woken up from a good nap. "Ah, right, Galactic Conquerors," he said, taking another sip of coffee. "You guys must be new around here." Admiral Kareth narrowed his eyes. "This is not a negotiation, human. You have one chance to surrender." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "And if we don't?" Kareth smirked. "Then we will unleash the full might of the Dominion upon your world." There was a pause. "Then," Hayes chuckled. Then he outright laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a forced one. A genuine, belly-shaking laugh. Admiral Kareth's smug expression faded. Hayes finally calmed himself, wiping a tear from the corner of his eye. Sorry. It's just... Oh man, you actually think this is gonna go your way, don't you?" The Imperial bridge crew stiffened. Kareth's golden eyes burned with fury. "You dare mock the might of the Dominion?" Hayes leaned forward. "Buddy," he said, setting down his coffee, "we haven't just been waiting for this day. We've been preparing for it." The reveal. Kareth sneered. "Your ships are outdated. Your defenses are laughable. What could you possibly do to stop us? Hayes smiled and pressed a button. Across the Dominion fleet, every screen flickered. And then, the deception unraveled. What the Dominion saw froze them in place. All around Earth, hidden deep within its solar system, thousands of human warships decloaked. Not the clunky, outdated vessels the Dominion had believed humanity possessed. These were monsters. Massive, sleek black warships, unlike anything recorded in Dominion databases. Their energy readings were off the charts. Their weapons were beyond comprehension. And worst of all, they had been there the entire time, watching, waiting, preparing. Admiral Kareth's blood ran cold. This is impossible, Captain Roll whispered, eyes wide in horror. Hayes leaned back again, a smug grin on his face. Oh, and about those unstoppable shields you guys have. We cracked your frequency cycles decades ago. Kareth's hands tightened into fists. And those planet-cracking weapons you're so proud of. Hayes continued, yeah, we built countermeasures a century ago. The Imperial Bridge was silent. Hayes sighed. See, we humans never really trusted that peace would last forever. It's just not in our nature. So while you all spent the last 1,000 years playing conqueror, we spent it getting ready. He took another sip of coffee. You guys really should have done your homework. The moment of realization. Admiral Kareth stared at the screens. This wasn't a war. This was a trap. And the Dominion had just walked straight into it. For the first time in 3,000 years, the great Imperial fleet felt something they had never felt before. Fear. Hayes' voice, now calm and deadly serious, cut through the silence. You have one chance, Kareth. Kareth's breath caught in his throat. Leave, now, while you still can. The bridge was silent. No one laughed this time. No one mocked. For the first time in Dominion history, they were the ones who were powerless. And Admiral Kareth realized the terrifying truth. Humanity wasn't afraid of the Dominion. Humanity had been waiting for this moment. And now it was the Dominion's turn to run. Humanity's trap closes. The bridge of the judgment of stars was silent. Not the silence of discipline. Not the silence of respect. The silence of fear. Admiral Val Kareth, one of the most feared commanders in the endless Dominion, clenched his fists so tightly his claws cut into his palms. This was not how this was supposed to go. The Imperial fleet, his unstoppable armada, now stood at the mercy of a species that, until now, had been considered a minor civilization at best. But the truth was now staring him in the face. Humanity had outplayed them. And from the smirk on Admiral Jonathan Hayes' face, he knew it. The impossible fleet. The human ships should not have existed. For centuries, the Dominion had monitored humanity's development, believing them to be far behind in military technology. Their intelligence reports had concluded that humanity's warships were laughably outdated, their weaponry primitive, their defenses obsolete. But what they saw before them defied everything they thought they knew. The UHS Revenant, the flagship of Earth's secret fleet, was unlike anything the Dominion had ever encountered. A monstrous black warship, its hull seemed to absorb light, rendering it almost invisible against the void of space. The energy readings from its systems were off the charts, its shield emissions unlike anything known to the Dominion. And it wasn't alone. The entire solar defense armada had been lying in wait, hidden by cloaking fields so advanced they had fooled even Dominion sensors. Now, they revealed themselves like predators emerging from the shadows. Thousands of human warships, silent and calculating, now surrounded the once dominant Dominion fleet. The hunters had become the hunted. A tactical nightmare. Kareth turned toward Captain Ishvan Rull, his second in command, struggling to suppress the rising panic in his chest. Give me a full tactical analysis. Now, Kareth barked. Rull's hands trembled as he worked his console. What he saw made no sense. Sir, Rull whispered, his voice hollow. I don't know how, but They've had us locked in their weapons range this entire time. Kareth's eyes widened. They had been in a kill box before they even arrived, and the humans had just been watching them. Kareth turned back to the screen, facing Hayes, who was now leisurely drinking from his coffee mug as if he had all the time in the world. "You set a trap for us," Kareth finally said, his voice forced into a growl. Hayes shrugged. "You walked right into it." Kareth gritted his teeth. "What are your demands, human?" Hayes set down his coffee. His eyes turned ice cold. "You invaded our system." Kareth said nothing. "You threatened our people." The human admiral leaned forward. "Now you pay the price." Hayes raised his hand and gave a simple, silent signal. "Fire." The first strike. It happened instantly. The UHS Revenant opened fire, unleashing a single kinetic round, a projectile moving at a fraction of the speed of light. The Dominion battlecruiser Imperial Wrath was the first to be hit. It never even had time to raise shields. The impact vaporized the ship, sending shockwaves through the Dominion ranks. One shot. One kill. Then the rest of the human fleet followed. Their weapons weren't massive energy beams like the Dominion's. They were invisible railgun rounds, silent torpedoes, and hull-piercing kinetic harpoons. Each shot precise, deadly, and unstoppable. Dominion shields, designed to deflect energy-based weapons, prove useless against these hyper-accelerated projectiles. One by one, Dominion warships exploded into flames, their hulking forms ripped apart by invisible weapons they couldn't even detect in time. The once unstoppable Imperial fleet was being shredded like paper. Admiral Kareth watched in horror as over 100 Dominion warships vanished in less than 30 seconds. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. The humans weren't brute force warriors. They were assassins. A desperate response. "Shields up. Return fire," Kareth roared. The Dominion fleet retaliated, unleashing their planet-shattering plasma cannons. But the humans had anticipated everything. The UHS Revenant and its fleet began to move, their engines using gravity-defying maneuvering systems. They didn't fight like the massive, bulky warships of the Dominion. They fought like predators, darting through space in unpredictable, physics-defying patterns. Human ships vanished from enemy targeting systems, moving too fast, too erratic, too precise. And the Dominion's attacks. They never hit their targets. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its slaughter, tearing apart the remaining Dominion ships like a pack of wolves tearing through prey. A Dominion dreadnought, the Eternal Dominance, tried to escape. A single human torpedo slipped through its shields, silently infiltrating the ship's structure. The explosion that followed ripped it in half. More Dominion ships began turning away. They were retreating. Admiral Kareth felt his breath hitch in his throat. This was impossible. The Dominion had never retreated, yet here they were, fleeing from humanity like frightened children. The final warning. Kareth turned back to Hayes, his hand shaking. The human admiral was still calm, his expression unreadable. "Ceasefire," Kareth finally said. We surrender." Hayes studied him for a moment, then sighed. "No," Hayes said simply. Kareth froze. "No. You didn't offer us a ceasefire when you arrived, did you?" Hayes asked, his voice quiet. Kareth's blood ran cold. "You came here to enslave us, to conquer us, to erase us," Hayes continued, his voice devoid of emotion. He leaned in toward the screen. "Now, we return the favor." Kareth opened his mouth to protest, but the transmission cut out. And then, the real slaughter began. The fall of the Dominion Armada. The nightmare unfolds. The Dominion Armada, once thought invincible, was in full retreat. Admiral Vale Kareth had never imagined this scenario. Never in the 3,000-year history of the Endless Dominion had they suffered such an absolute defeat. And yet here they were. His fleet, 2,000 warships strong, was being systematically dismantled by a human force that had been hiding in plain sight. It was not a battle. It was an execution. On the bridge of the Judgment of Stars, Kareth stood motionless, his mind refusing to accept the reality before him. "Admiral," Captain Ishvanrail shouted, snapping Kareth back to the present. "Our fleets are being wiped out. We must retreat." Kareth's claws dug into the railing before him, his golden eyes burning with fury and humiliation. The word retreat had never been uttered by the Dominion Navy. But now his officers were begging for it. And even worse, it was the only option left. "Order all remaining ships to retreat," Kareth snarled, his voice filled with venom and shame. But it was too late. Humanity wasn't going to let them escape. The closing of the trap. Admiral Jonathan Hayes, aboard the HFY Revenant, watched as the Dominion ships turned to flee. A smirk formed on his face. Exactly as planned. "Seal the exit routes," Hayes ordered. Across the outer Sol system, a hidden network of interdiction fields activated, cutting off the Dominion fleet's ability to jump to faster-than-light travel. They were trapped. Hayes leaned forward, his voice carrying a tone of absolute finality. "All units, finish them." The human fleet moved in for the kill. The desperation of the Dominion. "Admiral, our FTL drives aren't responding." Captain Rawl's voice was raw with fear, something that sent a chill down Kareth's spine. "They'd locked us in," another officer screamed. Kareth's breath came in ragged bursts as he watched the impossible unfold. The Dominion wasn't just losing, they were being hunted down like vermin. One by one, Dominion ships fell, cut down by invisible railgun rounds, precision kinetic strikes, and boarding teams that emerged like phantoms from the void. Every escape route had already been anticipated. Every strategy had already been countered. And humanity was enjoying it. A new transmission flashed onto the Dominion screens. It was Hayes. He was smiling. "You came to conquer us," he said, his voice eerily calm. "And now, you're running." Kareth's hands shook. "Your species thought it ruled the galaxy," Hayes continued. "But here's the truth. Admiral, your empire was never strong. It was just." He paused. "Lucky." A silence fell over the Dominion bridge. "Lucky that you never ran into someone stronger." Hayes leaned closer to the camera. "Until now." And then the final phase of the battle began. The final blow. The UHS Revenant fired again, a single shot from its experimental dark matter railgun. The round pierced through 3 Dominion battleships in a row, reducing them to glowing wreckage before they could even process what had happened. All across the battlefield, humanity's stealth teams infiltrated Dominion flagships, planting disruptor bombs that ripped apart their internal systems. The once mighty Imperial Armada had been reduced to less than 200 ships, and they were still falling fast. "Spare the ones who surrender," Hayes finally said. "Destroy the rest." A captain's last stand. "Admiral, we must go," Rail begged, desperation in his voice. Kareth stood frozen. His empire, his legacy, was collapsing before his very eyes. Everything he had believed, his fleet's invincibility, the Dominion's superiority, the weakness of humanity, was a lie. The truth was here, and it had arrived on black warships with silent guns and unseen blades. "Sir," Rail shouted again. Kareth closed his eyes for a long moment. Then finally, he spoke. "Order all remaining ships to surrender." A final wave of shock rippled through the bridge crew. The endless Dominion did not surrender. But Kareth had no other choice. He could either die today, or live to understand the force that had just shattered his reality. "Relay the message," Kareth said, his voice quiet. As the Imperial insignia dimmed on his screens, Kareth felt the weight of 1,000 generations of warlords pressing down on him. And for the first time in his life, he felt small. The aftermath. The battle was over. Out of 2,000 Dominion ships, only 70 remained operational. They floated in place, powerless, their crews staring in absolute horror at the debris fields surrounding them. Thousands of Dominion soldiers, pilots and officers had been taken prisoner. They had expected to conquer Earth. Instead, they were the ones in chains. On board the UHS Revenant, Hayes watched the surrender unfold. A deep satisfaction filled him. But he wasn't done yet. "Begin preparations," Hayes ordered. "We're going after their homeworld next." A hushed silence fell over the bridge. Then, a slow, knowing grin spread across his officers' faces. The Dominion had come to destroy Earth. Now, Earth was coming for them. And the galaxy would never be the same. The invasion of Drakkar Prime. The dawn of retaliation. The endless Dominion had always been the galaxy's supreme power, a relentless force that had conquered thousands of star systems, crushed entire civilizations beneath its heel, and ruled through the sheer terror of its war machine. But now, the Dominion was in freefall. Its greatest fleet had been obliterated, its warships reduced to wreckage, and its proudest warriors were either dead or prisoners aboard human vessels. And worst of all, for the first time in history, the Dominion was about to experience something it had never faced before. An invasion. Humanity, once dismissed as a weak, insignificant species, was now marching straight toward the Dominion's homeworld. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. The unstoppable fleet. In the cold vacuum of space, the largest human armada in history moved as one. Sleek, black warships, each one bristling with weaponry far beyond Dominion understanding, surrounded Drakkar Prime, the Dominion's homeworld, a world that had never been touched by war. The UHS Revenant, humanity's flagship of vengeance, led the charge. On its bridge, Admiral Jonathan Hayes stood with his arms folded, his gaze locked onto the planet before him. It was a beautiful world, towering golden cities, vast black oceans, endless mountain ranges stretching beyond the horizon. It was also the heart of the most feared empire in the galaxy. But today, it was nothing more than humanity's next conquest. A Dominion fleet, what little remained of it, had assembled in orbit, a last desperate defense. "Admiral," a voice called out. Hayes turned. Commander Evelyn Carter, his second in command, gave a curt nod. "They're hailing us." Hayes smirked. "Put them through." The final plea. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing Supreme Warlord Sci-Fi, the ruler of the Dominion Empire. For 3,000 years, Sci-Fi had ruled through fear, his voice alone enough to bring lesser species to their knees. But today, the once unshakable warlord looked like a man standing at the edge of his own grave. His golden eyes, once filled with pride and arrogance, were now bloodshot and sunken. Behind him, the Dominion's high command stood in silence, their expressions a mix of shock, terror, and disbelief. "You dare bring war to Drakkar Prime?" Sci-Fi spat, though his voice lacked the confidence it once held. Hayes raised an eyebrow. "You brought war to our home first," he said, his voice calm, unshaken. "Did you really think we wouldn't return the favor?" Sci-Fi's jaw tightened. "Your fleet may have destroyed our vanguard," he growled, "but Drakkar Prime is protected by our planetary defense grid. Our surface cannons can shatter moons. Our orbital stations are equipped with superweapons capable of reducing fleets to ashes. You have no idea what you are walking into, human." Hayes chuckled. Sci-Fi's eyes narrowed. "You find this amusing?" Hayes leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Did you really think we'd come this far without knowing exactly what you have?" Sci-Fi's breath hitched. "You see," Hayes continued, "we cracked your planetary defenses a century ago." Sci-Fi froze. "And those so-called super weapons you have," Hayes added, "we neutralized them before we even left Earth." Sci-Fi took a slow, staggering step backward. Hayes tilted his head. "You're not in control anymore, Warlord," he said softly. "You never were." Sci-Fi's face twisted in rage. "Even if you make it to the surface, we will fight to the last man." Hayes nodded. "Good," he said, his voice suddenly cold. "That'll make this more fun." Then he cut the transmission. All units, Hayes said, turning to his crew. Begin planetary assault. The fall of Drakkar Prime. The sky above Drakkar Prime ignited. Human dropships, orbital cannons, and planetary bombardment teams descended like vengeful gods, raining fire upon the Dominion's capital. Their planetary defenses, rendered useless. Their superweapons, shut down before they could even power on. For centuries, the Dominion had crushed civilizations beneath their heel. And now, they were experiencing their own terror for the first time. The streets of their capital burned. The towers of their great cities collapsed. And from the wreckage, human war machines emerged, their advanced exosuits and tactical battalions moving with lethal efficiency. The Dominion soldiers, once feared across the stars, found themselves outmatched, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Every tactic they tried had already been anticipated. Every strategy they used had already been countered, because humanity had been planning for this war long before the Dominion even knew their name. The last stand. In the heart of the capital, Sci-Fi and his remaining royal guard made their final stand in the Imperial Citadel. Blaster fire erupted through the halls as human soldiers stormed the stronghold, their power armor absorbing enemy fire as if it were nothing. Hold the line. Sci-Fi roared, cutting down a human soldier with his energy blade. We are the Dominion. But his warriors were falling fast. One by one, his elite soldiers were gunned down. And then, a single shadow stepped into the throne room. Admiral Jonathan Hayes. His face was expressionless, his gun still smoking from the last shot he had fired. Sci-Fi clenched his fists, his heart pounding. This is our world. He bellowed. You have no right. Hayes stepped forward. The strong rule the weak, isn't that what you always said? He asked. Isn't that how you built your empire? Sci-Fi bared his teeth. You humans are monsters. Hayes nodded. We learned from the best. Then he raised his gun and pulled the trigger. Sci-Fi's body collapsed, his golden eyes fading into darkness. And with that single shot, the endless Dominion, the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known, was finished. Forever. The aftermath. With their supreme warlord dead, the Dominion surrendered unconditionally. Their fleets, their armies, their entire empire crumbled overnight. For the first time in thousands of years, the galaxy was free from their tyranny. And humanity. Humanity had proven itself, not just as another player in the galactic stage, but as the single most powerful force the universe had ever seen. And now it was their turn to decide what happened next.